Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Full Quota podcast. My name is Mpho and Tim. I've got Tim Delace here with me. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, mate. It's good to be back. I enjoyed our little self-imposed break, but it's good to be back.
This isn't the start of the new season. It's the end of the previous one. We thought we'd ended with Andrew Betzke's interview, but as South African cricket goes, there's no week where there's no drama, and somehow we got a bombshell last week, Thursday. It's taking us a week to kind of digest because it is quite big news, and we're going to come and talk about that. But before we do anything, remember, Full Quota Podcast is on X. Please do follow us at Full Quota Pod. Subscribe to the One World Sports Radio YouTube channel. And also, for the audio listeners, we're also live on Full Quota Podcast at Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Just search for those two. We've got a growing fan base in the audio space, not necessarily rivaling the YouTube space, because that's obviously in the thousands, but we'd like to grow that to that level. So please do support us, share as widely as possible. This is your South African cricket podcast, the one that talks about everything in South African cricket. And so, yeah, let's dive into it. Hilton Moreeng last week, the Proteas women's coach, and that's what the episode is going to be about, just his time in the seat, and what we thought of the news last week. CSA Director of Cricket Enoch Nkwe announced that Hilton Moreeng would be stepping down. From our understanding is that he resigned. And the assistant coach, Dylan Dupree, who's been in the women's coaching setup for a while now, not a while, for close to a decade now. I think he coached Northwest. He's going to be taking over as the national women's coach in the interim until they look for a successor. There's a lot to unpack around that. And so that's what this podcast is about. Hilton was one of the first few interviews we did as the Full Quota podcast. And so, you can go back to the archives and see if you can find it. To the audio listeners, I might have to put it up specially so you can just hear from the man himself, as a special gift to Hilton, because I think he was one of the more successful cricketing coaches. He actually coaches in South African history. No coach in South African history lasts for this long. He lasted for over 12 years. And yeah, look, I think he walks away from the team with his head held high, with a lot of success. Yes, trophy wise he didn't succeed, but you saw the growth in the women's cricket throughout his tenure, as he took the reins going forward. But Tim, hearing that news on Thursday, what did you think instinctively? Because I know we always had our thoughts, and my thoughts were it was about time for him to go. And I think it's now time for us to celebrate him. But what were your initial thoughts when you got the message to say that they are announcing something at 2:00 and then the announcement?
Look, I was for the wider women's game. I was a little bit relieved. Hilton's done a fantastic job, but you didn't want the Proteas women to keep going in a downward spiral where I think whoever takes over, there is going to be a sort of a transition, and it's going to be a little bit tricky at that moment. So I was happy for Hilton because he held his head up high. He got that win in Australia, which was fantastic. So he ended it on, I think, a very high note on that tour of Australia. I think this was the right time. I think it was the right time for him to move on to pastures new, and I hope Cricket South Africa uses him in some capacity. But yeah, overall, I was pleased because I thought it was the right decision, and we didn't want stuff. We had lots of stuff happening from outside, and it sort of left a bitter taste, shall we say, a couple of months ago in terms of his future. So I think it was the right time for him to step down.
Yeah, to a certain extent, throughout his career, you can characterize it as him making the most of the little that he got, the little amount of sponsorship women's cricket got. I know Momentum started supporting the women's team in the middle of the last decade, but they still didn't get as much money. We didn't have a professional league. We had a domestic setup, but everybody was a semi-professional. And he found a way to shield all the problems from the team and try and get them to be better. I remember, I think it was in 2018 or 19 when the team was in India. It was like the first tour of them in India, and they are playing, obviously trying to play spin, and they're learning how to bat against spin on the go, and they don't have a batting consultant. It's just Hilton and his assistant coaches trying to teach the ladies how to play spin. After the first game, you start seeing sweep shots coming out, and you kind of got a sense of this is a project on the go, and it's been a project for a very long time. And we got to a point now in South African women's cricket where the Division One is professional, right? They're calling it the professional league, and that's what it is. Every 11 players get contracts now. I'd have loved it to be more, but it's kind of a situation of, is there someone who can then take this to the next step? There are still problems below, but you kind of felt that towards the back end of Hilton's time, he couldn't shut out the noise like he used to earlier on. I think the ladies that he's capped in his time treated them like they were his daughters. So there was that bond, and they listened to him, they trusted him, and I can never forget that 2020 World Cup, T20 World Cup in Australia, where we made it to the semi-finals, and it felt like it was a watershed moment, right? That they made it to the T20 semi-finals, and they had a chance because they beat England in that final group game, and Mignon du Preez just took over in that last over to get us over the line. You kind of felt, here's the start, and obviously with all the rain coming in, you're sitting there going, maybe there's hope, and yes, Australia blew us out the water with those 6 overs, but it was like, yes, we've done it. We're getting over, and we just kept on getting into semi-finals from then on, and we just couldn't get through, and we finally got into the final, and that's a record he'll hold forever as the first senior coach to make it into an ICC event final from South Africa. Well, not from South Africa, but a coach of South Africa, seniors, because Gary Kirsten made it to a World Cup final. And yeah, look, I think once it started getting a little stale and stagnant, as that generation started retiring, Danae, Mignon, I wanted to say Sine, but Sine's still playing.
Ishmael.
Shabnam Ishmael, yes. You and Trisha Chetty as well, because she was a very key part of that period, right? You felt that there was nothing underneath, and it wasn't necessarily his issue or his problem. It's an issue that the CSA is doing in terms of development, right? And you kind of felt that everything was stale. That Australia tour was a kick of a dying horse. It was good to see that the team can still respond to him, but then the Bangladesh and the Sri Lanka series, you kind of sat there going, something's fundamentally wrong here. Something is wrong, and you kind of feel like there's a change. And Tim, I think the first thing for me in terms of that, and I know I've spoken largely around that he needed to go, largely because we needed to get some fresh ideas. And I thought after that World Cup finally took us to the end, and that was it. But there are a couple of things off the bat just around the situation. Firstly, obviously, he was on a 1-year contract, right? It was on a rolling contract, largely because CSA last year put out the job into the market and nobody picked it up, which was really interesting. And I think it's a revelation that Enoch said that they were headhunting people, which also was kind of, and it's a surprise that they weren't able to find someone. But like, I think the other question to you is, obviously it's going to be tough to find a successor. But the other thing, oh yes, sorry, it was that they couldn't find someone, to beg your pardon. And the other thing is, there was a letter from the players, a rumor. It could be, I think it's widely spoken about. It's quite true that the players wrote a letter to CSA to say that they'd like for Hilton to move on. And I think that was the smoking gun that led to Hilton resigning.
Yeah, and look, everything needs a reboot. Everything needs a change. Everything needs a new direction. Manchester United with Sir Alex. Everything needs something, a new blood, a new fresh ideas to come through. So that is perfectly understandable. That's from a player's perspective. They want something new. I don't think it's necessarily a criticism of Hilton. It's more a criticism of. It's more a realization that the game is moving so fast that they need I need something different. They need something different. If you do the same thing over and over again, you make the same mistakes, and that was starting to creep in towards the end. But just the one thing I want to touch on, and you still touched on, when he arrived, it was semi-professional. When he arrived, there were no central contracts. 6 months after he arrived, first contracts came into play. So he has taken the team all the way from semi-professional right up to now, where we have a fully professional. I think we have 3 times as many central contracts now. It was 6 in 2012.
It's the same as the men now. It's a similar.
Yeah. So he's taken us all the way through. The foundations. I think the biggest credit for he can take is he has created wonderful foundations for whoever takes over to build from. We talk about the many issues we have, but the foundations, I think, within women's cricket, in terms of what Hilton has produced, is very strong. We are right now a very competitive team that can beat the best. We've just beaten Australia. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. So I think it's a very exciting time. So I just think you look back at Hilton's reign. Although there could be, as you say, a little bit of disappointment in the last couple of series, I hope he is proud of his achievement, because that outweighs the last sort of 18 months where things started to fall apart a little bit. Overall, he's done a fantastic job for the women side.
Look at and let's have a look at that fantastic job. We just got a graphic on his achievements. I think his first set of achievements, and I'll just speak it out for the audio listeners. Hilton was in charge for the Proteas Women for 279 matches across all 3 formats. He had a win percentage ratio of 51.61%. That's obviously a pass. But in ODI cricket, which predominantly they played more of those, 56% win ratio, with him winning 84 out of the 149 matches. In T20s, it was less than the pass mark. It was 47.2%, winning only 60 out of the 127 matches. He had 1 draw and 2 losses in Test cricket. I think the draw was against England, I think, because of all the rain that happened there the last time. 49 players were capped under him for the Proteas Women since 2012. He became the first national coach to guide a senior team to a final of an ICC global event when the Proteas Women lost to Australia in that 2023 Women's T20 World Cup final that was held in Cape Town. But it was preceded by 2 semi-final appearances in 2014 and in 2020, the Women's World Cup, the sad 2020 World Cup. But if you look at his World Cup appearances, because some coaches like to be judged on that, it doesn't look too bad for a coach who came in when everything was semi-professional. And you've just seen the growth. And you can see the growth of our women's cricket as we go along. Looking at the Women's World Cup, first one under his charge was 2013. He finished in 6th. The next one in 2017 in England, they finished in the semi-finals. They got hammered by England in that game. In 2022, they finished in the semi-finals again. Tim, finished in 3rd place, you could say so, because it did really, really well in that 2022 World Cup. In the World T20, There were more frequent of those. That was a little bit more of a variable thing, but you can see the progression in the end. Struggled to get out the group stages in 2012. Got to the semifinals in 14. Couldn't get out the group stages in 2016 and 2018. The West Indies couldn't get out the group stages again, but managed to get to the semifinals in Australia in 2020. And last year at home, they were runners up. It created a new storm for women's cricket in that World Cup last year. It was really, really awesome. And then obviously the ICC Women's Championship, which is effectively the bilateral series for women's cricket around the world. You get points for wins, you get you get points for wins, and you get for the wins that you get, similar to like a league style situation. And for the 2014 to 2016 cycle, South Africa finished in 5th, and in the 2017 to 2020 cycle, South Africa finishing in 3rd. We'll get you. Yes.
Currently in this season, we are 2nd in the cycle 22 to 2025. We are currently in 2nd place.
Yes, and so he leaves and so to a certain extent, if you look at all those achievements, he leaves the team on a high. He leaves them in a good place. And to a certain extent, you can see what he's done. You can see with the development of the cricketers that have come through. How Marizan, how Dene, how Sune, how Mignon, how Shubnim, how Chloe, how all the players that have come through the system of the last decade have just kept on improving. And you get to a point where you get a Laura Wolfart in 2019, and you're like, this is the fruits of the labor that you can produce the world's best batter, and to a certain extent, Coach Hilton has a lot to be thankful for. We South Africa have a lot to be thankful for Coach Hilton, because he's done a lot. And if you look at those stats, Tim, that World Cup record, the T20 World Cup record, could be better, but everything's about improvement. And you kind of got a sense, as you said, in the last 18 months, that it started going a little offish. I know we've spoken about this a lot on the show, but Tim, what started going wrong?
I think it was largely due to picking the same kind of players, even when they were out not performing. And that goes to a larger point about the lack of a wider pool within South African women's cricket. So that's not entirely Hilton's fault, but it did mean that the Proteas women were suffering. If you keep picking, for example, Sunil Loose, in an ideal world, Sunil Loose should have been dropped a year ago. In an ideal world, and somebody should have come in instead of her. And she's not the only one. There were 2 or 3 that were not performing for the Proteas for at least the last 6 months.
Annika Bosch, Anri Dirksen. Some of those players just couldn't make that step up, right? And obviously Chloe Tryon was injured. Shubnim Ishmael had resigned. But the other thing for me was, it felt like post-COVID, the senior players, because previously everything was dealt with, especially in relation to CSA, wasn't dealt with in the media. But there were a few more things that came in, the Dene situation, some of the senior players wanting just getting, Lizelle Lee, and you kind of got a sense that he was starting to lose control of the dressing room as the players became a lot more famous and they became a lot more noteworthy. And it's a consequence of his success, right? Especially after that 2020 World Cup, you started obviously seeing the 100, and now you're seeing his core players looking for opportunities elsewhere, which is great. But it also kind of was now the way in which we operated as a team and how I controlled the team as Hilton, it started changing a little bit, to the point where it led to a letter from the players to say that we think this man isn't the guy who's going to lead us forward. And it's like 4 months before a World Cup. And so you're sitting here going, okay, so that's to say, like the current players in the setup, the contracted players, are currently saying, okay, no, we're happy to even go into a World Cup with a new coach, But my question is, was it the right time to let him go? knowing that you've got the Bangladesh World Cup later this year, could you not have announced that the World Cup's going to be his last time? Or is it an indication, Tim, that maybe that letter was a little bit more heated than you would have expected? It wasn't a, we'd like for you to consider him moving. It was more of a, can you get him out now?
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, again, we're talking about ideal worlds. I think in an ideal world, he should have stepped down after the home World Cup. I think the minute that was a high, that was the ultimate high of Proteas women cricket. There was the only way that he could have improved is if he had won the tournament, which we were not a million miles away from doing. But I did feel like it was like the end of an era, the end of an episode, the end of a fantastic period. That was the time I felt to call it quits. Saying that, I'm glad he got that win in Australia, just to show everybody that, you know what, I can still produce the goods. I'm still a good coach. I can still bring out the best. Maybe not as consistently as he had in previous years, but it was sort of a nice way to finish it. But as I say, I still think in an ideal world, after the home World Cup would have been the ideal moment to do it. But as we know, Cricket South Africa, they're a little bit too reactive. They do not do things in a proactive way. He'd already led the team for 11 years by that point. 11 years is a
What's
long
another
time.
6 more months going to do?
What is they should have, thought of that and moved forward with the times and gone with somebody new. But so yeah, in an ideal world, that's what I would have done. But we know it wasn't quite that simple. As you rightly pointed out, when they put out the feelers that was available, people were not running to the door to take the job. So that's a tricky situation to be in.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, that's where the issue lies, right? I thought about this. Even I spoke with Lubabalo, who has his own podcast, and is also a friend of the show, and my friend as well. And I had, and my thinking around it was, yes, it was the right time now, and the reasoning for me was, if I look at that World Cup in Bangladesh, is there a chance we're going to win it? If there was a chance, this current team in its own composition and the way it was playing post Sri Lanka was able to win that World Cup in Sri Lanka, I would have said no, you stick it out with Hilton until the end. But I look at it and I'm sitting there going, this team has been trending downwards. There was an upward little spike with Australia where we won games we didn't think we were going to win. But none of the games from Australia have transferred through into this year, and to a certain extent, probably precipitating the letter from the players. So my thing is this: at this point in time, as I look at the squad under Hilton, I don't think we make the semis. So then why not give someone else a chance? And to a certain extent, it is that way. My only issue, Tim, and this is coming to us now, moving to what next. Dylan Dupree, successful coach. He won a lot of domestic titles. I think he was at Northwest. He was very, very successful. Moves into the national side. Bringing him in was a great idea, and I think he was good. The question is it going to be a and I know Dylan's his own man. I'm sure he's got plans on the side that maybe necessarily that are different to Hilton's. But my worry is you might get a little bit of a Hilton 2.0. Even in the wording that he was like, no, Hilton's just a phone call away and all of that stuff. And I'm in my head, I was thinking, well, is that the best way of going about it? Or is it just you saying, is it him trying to pay homage to the guy before him? And it's going to be very interesting to see how that unfolds as the camps come through, as we hear the players talking and we get views from the camps as to what life under Dylan is. Because I think maybe he could be the next guy to take us forward. But I think for me, and maybe I don't know what you think, and you'll let me know, I'd like for it to be a woman. One. I don't know how far Denisha is in her development, but if she's a level 4 coach, it could make sense to bring her in.
She's level 4. She is
it
level
could
four.
make sense for you to bring her in. I think that would be the best way. But the other thing I think this for Dylan and Denisha, if they become the final coach, I think they might need a consultant from Australia or England. Not to discuss the transformation, we've got transformation issues, but to help try and work on the development of the core group of players. And to a certain extent, this brings into maybe it's the right time to split out the director of cricket role to have a director of women's cricket role, so we can try and make the Proteas Women and the pipeline, because in my head, the way I see the way Hilton's reign went out, it's just that development somewhere of women's cricket stagnated at some point in time. We're producing girls, but they're not at the quality we need for the international stage. And you can see that with that team that went to the Africa Games. That team should have won the Africa Games gold medal, but they didn't. They should be at that level of the teams that were playing there. And to a certain extent, you can say, yes, they were. But they lost to Namibia and they lost to Zimbabwe, which is a red flag for me and was a big, big red flag for me, as the system somewhere along the line isn't working. So it's either you bring in a consultant to try and upskill the players who are talented in the system, but it's also quite important to give Dylan now, and maybe even Denisha in the future, the opportunity to run it their own way. But what do you think about that?
The first thing I would do, if I walk in that door and they'd say, "Oh, Tim, what would we do?" Get the Denisha in straight away. Now, I think that she should be head coach, but if they are a little bit apprehensive about that and they want a sort of an in-between, I actually, I think if somebody like Hilton steps down, I think it should be a clean break. I think it should be a clean break from anything within Hilton. So that's no disservice to Dylan, and maybe he'll be fantastic. But if I'm there, I'm saying thank you, Dylan. Thank you very much. We're moving in a
Do you think they
completely
asked Denisha?
I don't know, but if I'm doing it, I'm making her head coach. If not, then I'm making her assistant to Dylan. We had Denisha on a short while ago,
2 years
and
ago.
she has
Oh,
the
yes.
she has the finger on the pulse as to where it's going wrong, and she has been working at the coalface of that pipeline of young South African women's players. So she knows the best of the best that are coming through and where they are in their game. So for me, it's an absolute no-brainer that should happen. Then the question is, I do think a sort of a consultant would work. My question is, does Cricket South Africa have the money? I know that the American woman used an Australian, and she did fantastic work there. Um, I know that they think very, very highly of her. I do know that they would. I saw a quick info article said that they are looking to do a head of director of women's cricket. That was about a year ago. They were
But
sort of
that still
looking
hasn't.
into it, and it still hasn't been filled. That's an issue. That is an issue. So yes, I would have a director of women's cricket, a head, and an assistant. That's what I would be doing it. But the first thing I would be doing is getting Dinesh in there in some capacity, either as the head or the assistant. For me, that is an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah, no, I think so. And to a certain extent, yeah, because I was 50-50 with Dylan, and I understand Dylan was in there, and there was a time where before COVID, if you had said you wanted Hilton out, who was going to come in, it'd be Dylan. But obviously now Dinesh has done a lot of great work, even identifying players from the pipeline. That under 19 side has done an incredible. She's done an incredible job with them, and some of those players should be coming through now into the system, right? And so it kind of would make sense. I kind of felt that CSA didn't want to like bypass. I think they created an unfortunate like second step with having Dylan as the assistant. So it's kind of like a ladder type of situation, which um yeah, look, I don't know how Danish is feeling, but yeah, it's quite interesting. But it is an interim role. They have to put out the job they have to advertise the job, and then they have to get applicants in. So it'll be interesting to see who comes in to that into that situation, and see how it is, and how that works. There are some really great coaches out there in South African cricket, and it'll be interesting to see who they end up picking, right? And to a certain extent, Dylan has a bit of an audition with the series before Bangladesh, to kind of for us to see what for us to see what he can do. It was really weird because um, it was really weird because uh, Enoch was put in an interim position as well, right? And the Proteas Women are going to India in June, right? And so it's interesting because Enoch was in the same situation, Tim, as Dylan Dupree, where he's the interim, getting given that opportunity to lead a side to India, which is not the easiest place to go, and it's a question of what you can do. And I thought outside of the Test series, I thought in the T20s that 1-1 draw was good enough. And it was kind of like a poison chalice for him. Do you think it'll be a poison chalice for Dylan? But I think in Dylan's eyes, he just needs that opportunity in the seat. At this point in time, I don't think he'd be able to have gotten that opportunity had they advertised the position and there was a clean break.
Yeah, I don't get the impression that he's daunted by the situation. I don't get the impression that he is that kind of character. To me, he strikes me as in this way as a player willing to take on the hard graft, willing to take on the hard yards. The road ahead for the Proteas Women is not going to be an easy one because they are, in my opinion, still a couple of retirements that are around the corner, and that's going to make his job even more difficult. I think there will be a dip in results, which I think will be a natural happening because of those sizable retirements that are still to come. But I do think he believes that he can take them to that next level. And that next level is, of course, winning a trophy, some kind of trophy.
Yes,
yeah.
Yeah, look, I think, and that's what he inherits, right? He inherits a team in flux, right? There's going to be a few more retirements happening along the corner. And you kind of, if you want to echo it to like a Proteas situation, you got that period where the only players left are like Hash and Faf, and everyone's retired. You know, even AB's gone. And you're building with guys who don't know how to win at this level, and you have to teach them how to win at this level, right? Because that's the thing about cricket is you have to know where you need to be to win a game, especially in the longer formats, right? There's a certain level of things you can do outside of all the crazy things that people do, like a 200 for Maxwell or whatever it is. But there's a way in which you learn how to win at the pro level and how to stitch a game together in order for you to win. That's what needs to happen here. And to a certain extent, I think that's what this team lost. And they found it here and then was inconsistent, but that's what Dylan needs to kind of bring in and bring in a lot of new youngsters. You know, I don't mind him going to the Cinnamodeni Lawrences, to bringing in the Karabo Mesos as the wicket keeper, to trying and seeing if Ayanda Subi's got what you need. She's still a lot of growth to go. She has to probably get a little bit more pace here and work on that and work on our fast bowlers' pace over and above building around some of the players that are still there. The Chloe Tryons, the Marizan Cups are going to be drawn by the lure of international T20 cricket, and they're probably going to want to spend a year traveling around the world, IPL, Big Bash, 100, that type of thing. So we need to be able to brace ourselves for that. And so whomever comes into the seat inherits that, and that's going to be quite a big thing for them to try and get this young team, because it's going to be a young team or slightly inexperienced team, humming and ticking again. Over and above that, trying to act in women's cricket and play at the level of number 1, 2, or 3 in the world. India is fighting for that spot, and I think they've improved dramatically with that. And it's the influx of the IPL. But my thing is, and my hope is this, and I think maybe we can end it here. I'm gonna on CSA. They didn't do their job by Hilton. They didn't do right by the women of this country, especially in terms of cricket. And Hilton is just a consequence of their lack of adequate support. It took you too long, 2024, to make women's cricket professional, to take a punt on women. Even though from 2017, had you started making the right investments, we would have a team that is good enough and can continue that. And we were very late. We didn't even last year, I don't think we've worked on the gains of that World Cup final. It just seems a long time ago. But we haven't actually seen the tangible benefits of it coming. And to a certain extent, we thank government for coming through and helping out, sponsoring the salaries for the women and thingy. But to a certain extent, this the downturn in our Proteas Women comes as a result of the lack of development. And I think we've lost, I don't know how many years we lost, but if I look at from 2017 to now, 7 years, that was our first semi-final appearance or of note in a 50 over World Cup, because we play 50 overs a lot. From then on up until now, yes, there have been a few players that have come in, but they haven't. That underbelly of domestic cricket isn't there, and it is as a result of the fact that our cricket for women was semi-professional, and if you got semi-professional cricket, it's not going to work. Now it's professionalized. Now we need to see. We hope that the fruits will come through, but to a certain extent, Hilton made the most of this team, and he achieved all he had achieved, and he's gone through all his achievements with his hand tied behind his back. He had a handbrake up, driving a car on a highway, and he managed to make the most of it. And to a certain extent, coach, well done. But I understand, in my head, it's CSA should look at themselves and try to find a way to support Dylan and whomever the new coach is in ensuring that women's domestic cricket is growing. It's the next, and the way I see it, Tim, and this is my final point, if CSA is running out of money and they're trying to get money, women's cricket is where you can sell it. It's a new product. It's a great product. The success of the Proteas women will add money into your pockets. Just like if the Proteas men win this World Cup in the West Indies, you'll get money in your pockets because everybody would want to be associated with this team. The easy one would have been women's cricket because there's not a lot of teams in women's cricket. They're not as strong as on the men's side. And there's that opportunity for you to be able to do that. And that's where I think they missed the trick from a long-term development. I hope Enoch has that now. And I hope we've got plans in place for the 2027 World Cup and the World Cups beyond that. Because outside of hosting a World Cup, which we did, and it brought a lot of things, we still need to work on everything else around the game. And what the back end of Hilton's tenure showed was there was a point where development stopped. And now we're looking at, even in the domestic scene, we're looking at players who've been there for years, playing for the same teams, but the newer ones aren't coming in. And they only started coming in now with the SA Under 19 side because the ICC said we need to have an Under 19 World Cup. And that's when the work started coming in. And you can see that was during COVID and now. So you've got a base, but you need to grow from it. You can't allow that base to die. And to a certain extent, the fact that we could not have a replacement for Shubnam Ishmael, we could not have a replacement for the batting that Dene brought to the team or the batting that Mignon brought to the team, says a lot about where this team was. And it was reliant on a few, and he made the most with the little that he had. And congratulations, coach. That's all I can say because you had an incredible tenure. But CSA, I hope that they're looking at themselves as well.
Yeah, I second every word that you said there. That every word, but that it's it's fantastic. We've got a professional setup, a professional woman setup. But if you watch it, it just shows actually that the minimal work that has been done to get here, because the standard is not where it should be. That's not a smite on the players. That is a smite on Cricket South Africa. Cricket South Africa has made this product not where it should be. The women's game in a domestic setup is not where it should be. When you watch it on your live streams, if you watch it on your television screens, it is not where it should be. If that was where it was 10 years ago, you could make a, okay, well, that's fine. That's we're starting from somewhere, starting from scratch, that's fine. It's not where it needs to be. A lot more needs to be done. A lot more money needs to be found to benefit the players and find that next crop of Proteas women, because we've discussed this many, many times before. Our pool is not nearly as wide as it should be. It really isn't. Our men's pool is massive. Our men's pool is absolutely massive. Our women's game is very, very tiny, and that is a problem.
And I'll tell you where we need to do investments, and I think we'll end it here. Simple things. In university cricket, you need to find a way to have the provinces be attached to universities to be able to create a breeding ground for girls who finish playing cricket in high school and want to continue it while they're doing their studies, right? Not everyone has a pathway to the pros. Some will have a pathway to the pros, but the start of the pathway starts from women's cricket, right? I do think there's a varsity women's cricket setup that needs to be pulled out. You can't wait once a year to go play USA in order for you to, you need something that can keep girls who are interested in cricket playing cricket as a semi-professional sport. But the fundamental thing is a couple of things you need to change domestically, and I hope they do. And I want to put this down on the podcast, right? Is one, Division 2, you need to play for 11 players in Division 2 who for their contracts. It just can't be Division 1. It has to be in Division 2. You cannot have a system where you're effectively paying for 66 players, but you're not paying for the rest of those in the system, because that's where it dies. I understand there's no money there, but in business, you need to invest in places. That's the place where you need to invest in order for you to reap the benefits. You may not see the benefits from a domestic product perspective, but you'll see it as the Proteas women go through, because the competition for places will be high. To have 100, 150 professional women playing cricket, that's what you want, right? Getting paid. The other thing, and I think maybe this should be the quick fix, if you don't want to do the investment in Division 2, the quick fix is increase, and don't look to the national lottery, don't look to government, look to yourselves and your sponsors. Go find money to pay for between 2 to 4 additional spots on the 6 Division A, Division 1 teams. So to move from 11 to 15. So, because the issue for me is 11 players are professional. Who's the 12th player and what are they doing? So the 12th player, if there's an injury, now they've got a job that they have to leave so they can play cricket. But they don't have security of income because they're not cricketers. So they do the whole juggling thing. Rather just pay for at least 13. Have a squad of 13 and do it. And I know Gordon Matheson spoke about this, right? Here and there, and Gordon and the Limpopo Gordon, there's many Gordons in our lives, Tim, spoke about obviously the whole capping of 11 players in Division 2. They'd like 2 more. That's essentially what you need to do. Yeah. And so, Tim, so essentially it would be 2 players times 6, that's 12 players. You need to find between 12 to 15 million rand. That's all you need to find. It's a drop in the ocean when you have a 700 million rand revenue base, right? And so maybe that's the investment that you need to make. SA20, if you want to make an investment, that's the type of investment you need to make in women's cricket. We'd love a women's SA20, we'd love it. But fundamentally, we'd love for you to feed the women's players in this country first. Open up and then widen the pool for women's cricket players. It's going to benefit you in the auction, right? widen the pool of women's players, get them salaried, and get them playing cricket for the love of it. And then we don't have the, oh no, I've got to go to work. Oh no, I'm fully focused on cricket all year round. They can do whatever they want during the off season, but we're fully focused. They can train at their facilities, at their clubs. They can grow the game, because once they're fully into cricket, the development just skyrockets. And so for me, that's what it is. We don't have a pool of 66 players, as Andrew mentioned, that there were 66 players that came on because of the contract. It should be a pool of 150, or closer to 100. You need a wider pool of players who are professional. So you need to consider what those professional contracts look like. I think in Division 2, there's only 5 professional contracts, 6 professional contracts per team. You need to include that to a lot more. But I speak under correction, but essentially that's where the investment in the women's game comes in. Do you want to go get sponsorship? Go get sponsorship. What do you want to do? Go do whatever you want to do. But you have to take some money and put it in the women's game, because you're going to have situations like this where we were lucky that we had a generation of girls and ladies who grew into the game and became world class. How are we going to get this crop of under 19 players, the guys who are already in the domestic system, to becoming better and world-class players? Is if you invest in the lower parts, you create competition, you create urgency, and you keep pushing. The Dolphins winning the CSA 50 over challenge isn't just a small little thing. It's a huge thing, because that's a team with a base of players who can make the Proteas, and I think should make the Proteas. Alex Candler is the #1 run scorer. She should be in the side, right? Nondu Miso Shangase, the captain. She's a spinner. She's worked on her batting. Put her in there, right? She captained that team to the Africa Games. So for me, that's where it is, right? The moment you start investing in those areas, you'll be fine. But to a certain extent, over the last couple of years, the investment's been slow. Now, obviously, we've seen, thanks to government and National Lottery, to do that. If you want to go back to government but beg them, please beg them. It's just an additional 10 to 12 million rand just to pay for salaries, and everything else you'll start seeing a lot more proper, because now we're not fighting over, do I need to go to work or school? I'm playing cricket all day long. I'm thinking about cricket all day long. I can go to physio in the afternoon. I can play cricket. I don't have to worry about going to work. And for me, that's how you improve women's cricket. And maybe if Hilton had an exit interview, I hope this is what he's saying to CSA. Outside of it probably being very heated, but I hope this is what he's saying. But Tim, I think let's end it there. Any final words to the coach and your thoughts on his career and everything else?
No, just to thank him for an excellent job and creating the foundations that are now set for that next step. I think it should be that should be his legacy, creating the foundations for that next step up for the Proteas Women. Fantastic job.
Yes, and I think, Coach, I've been a massive fan of yours the last decade. Really proud of your achievements, and I hope that you continue in your future endeavors. You succeed. I don't know where you're going to land, but wherever you land, I think it'll be a success. I do hope you're not lost to South African cricket, women's cricket forever. And I do think there is a spot for you in the boardroom if you'd like it. Because I think nobody knows best how to grow the game of women's cricket outside of you. And maybe a suit and a tie and a different challenge in Melrose could be something that could be something that's enticing. But it's been a great tenure, all your achievements. We'll never forget the fact that you're the first coach to lead the South African senior side to a World Cup final. So yeah, it's been great. I think he leaves the team in a very good position. And yeah, look, we had a couple of blips at the end, but they were up and up and up. And based on the World Cup records, you're there. And you're the number 2 cricket team in the world. So you go to India, number 2 cricket team in the world. Yeah, and good luck to Dylan and the women's team, the Proteas Women. Hopefully it'll be successful tour. A successful India tour makes us believe. If it's not successful, it'll be something else. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. This was fun. And yeah, hopefully everyone has a good day. And yeah, let us know what you think about Coach Hilton and the women's cricket setup and what CSA can do, because I think, yeah, we're behind and we need to move forward.
And we have a very exciting interview next week. So just keep your ears peeled and keep watch out for that.
Yeah, we always come with exciting interviews. Really, really do. But let your friends know, let everyone know. And yeah, from us here at the Full Quarter Pod, thank you very much and goodbye. And lesale kakahiso.